A Kentucky winter, more often than not, is an odd blend, really, of different seasons all rolled into one. You can have the cold, and snowy, blowing snow and things, or windy and rainy conditions that it'll blanket the land from time to time. But just as sure, the winter season may experience a spring-like spell with the warm temperatures and cobalt blue skies and the tepid winds. Well, such a day greeted me late in January in 2023 as I made my way over to Barren River Lake for a day of walking along the shoreline and photographing just simply what showed up. And oddly enough, the day started off somewhat seasonable with chilly temperatures that formed a layer of crystal-like frost over much of the landscape. But by mid-morning, all of that frost had dissolved and leaving in its wake just kind of some wet surfaces and things. And there's a few isolated remnants of patchy frost that you could find protected inside some shaded areas. Well, Barren River Lake is, for me, an underutilized resource. The past couple of years, I've tried to remedy that by doing more canoeing, fishing, and isolated gravel beach camping, and along with other things, like taking photos and things like that. It's a beautiful lake with bluff-like features in certain areas and abundance of wildlife that you can find along the edges and even on the water. And it's a quiet nature that prevails around it for most of the park. Well, my intent on this day was to simply take a hike along the shoreline and photograph whatever might be there. And as usual, I showed up a bit later than I should have, about an hour or so, and probably missed the best light of the day. But even so, the bright blue sky bathed the lake in a brilliant light, creating a crisp and clean appearance, to the landscape that surrounded the waters around it. And as that turned out, I was able to capture a few scenic photos. The light was pretty harsh though, and at a lot of times when the light is harsh like that, I tend to shoot more looking into it or across it as opposed to having the light coming from behind me. And by doing so, you artificially can create a kind of a hazy angled light that is much more appealing photographically than traditional direct light. The angled light will illuminate the humidity in the air, creating a soft bluish nature to the atmosphere. And this, along with shadows and reflections, this combination can offset that harsh nature of a bright sunny day. It was fun watching those gulls fly around. They would gracefully circle a few yards above the water and constantly watching for a school of bait fish or something. And when they'd sight one, boy, in just an instant, they would just dart straight into the water and snatch a quick meal from inside that school, and then they would take off again. And I'd get a big kick out of how when one caught something, all the other gulls would try to steal it from him. And they'd all go off, flying off, squawking and squealing, and one of them, they were kind of protesting to each other. Sometimes a single gull would swoop in low just above the water, and snatch a bait fish that was just under the surface, and then it would just immediately zoom skyward, holding the small fish in its beak. And again, within seconds, 3 or 4 or more gulls would zoom in from behind and try to steal it. And sometimes they would, but most of the times they couldn't, would not get away with it. Well, by mid-afternoon, those beautiful blue skies began to turn kind of white as some thin clouds kind of moved in, and eventually those clouds kind of turned sort of gray, and it was sort of in response to a cold front that was headed our way. And I decided to go ahead and take off a little earlier than I intended to, but by the time I got home, it really was starting to look like rain was on its way, and it was, because it rained later on. It was a good, relaxing day, really, to be out like that, and it was fun to spend time with my agile and graceful gull friends. And in time, they will migrate toward their breeding grounds. It's a bit further north, and the lake will fall into a more quiet mood as their squawks and squeals and arguments tend to grow silent. Well, that evening, as I spent time sorting through all the hundreds of photos I took, I noticed one thing about all of them. Well, most of them, they all kind of look the same. Similar in their composition and texture, and all the little pieces that make a photo look like a photo. But it's like I always say about any photo outing, all you really need is one. And I believe I got that photo today.